All right, let's begin with prayer. Gracious God, thank you for the chance we have to learn from your word, to look at your word. We ask for the movement of your Spirit among us as we talk and ponder. Bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, third session, chapter 3. That works, doesn't it? Actually, we're going to do 3 and 4. So, who will read for us chapter 3? Thank you, Jill.
The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, "Get up, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim the message that I tell you." So Jonah set out and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly large city, a 3 days' walk across. Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's walk, and he cried out, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast, and everyone, great and small, put on sackcloth.
Okay, let's talk about that first paragraph. I'm going to dash your what they just said. No offense. Nineveh was not that big. It was a couple miles wide at its largest, and probably about 7 miles in circumference or in perimeter. So it wouldn't take 3 days unless you really, did baby steps. But remember how we said initially, the word big is big in Jonah, and so exceedingly large city makes sense along with the big fish and the exceedingly great wind, and everything is exaggerated. And also, some commentators say it could be that the text is referring to a Nineveh that used to be when it was the powerful capital of the Assyrian Empire. And by the time the book of Jonah was written, it was much diminished. It already had been destroyed by the Babylonians. But also as the capital of the Assyrian nation, it should be big, and it's also intended to show the power of God. A very different Jonah from 2 weeks ago. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, and he got up and he went. He didn't want to get back in the belly of that fish. So I think I mentioned this before. In Hebrew, his prophecy, his sermon is 5 words. 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. I can't say it to you in Hebrew, but you probably wouldn't care anyway. Luther said, greater than all of the miracles, I don't know about all the miracles, but he was very impressed with the fact that short a sermon had such powerful impact, such significant impact. So go on, Jill, let's read what the impact was.
When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. Then he had a proclamation made in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, no human being or animal, no herd or flock shall taste anything. They shall not eat, nor shall they drink water. Human beings and animals shall be covered with sackcloth, and they shall cry mightily to God. All shall turn from their evil ways and from the violence that is in their hands. Who knows? God may relent and change his mind. He may turn from his fierce anger so that we do not perish. When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil ways, God changed his mind about the calamity that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Sackcloth, of course, is like burlap. It's uncomfortable. So if you're mourning, if you're repentant, you're uncomfortable, which is the way you're supposed to be. And then the fasting, he includes the animals. I'm trying to picture cattle in a field covered with burlap and not eating. And then later, nor shall they drink water. So, it's a little bit odd and powerful from those 5 Hebrew words that this is what the king of Nineveh, how the king of Nineveh should react.
I can see the animals making a lot of noise when they're not being fed. Like we said, that they shall cry mightily.
I would be crying mightily too, as a human being not being fed. Go back to Jonah's prophecy. 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. He doesn't have any, if you don't. He doesn't have any reason. Yeah. So why do you think, what overcame the king from that one? Well, actually, the people reacted before the king did. Did they just feel so guilty? Were they just aware of their sin? Is it something that, I have a Catholic friend who hates, well, he doesn't have to do it anymore, but the private confession, he always says it's a bunch of stuff that I don't feel guilty for and that I'm supposed to confess. That's not the way the king or the people of Nineveh reacted. They knew what Jonah was talking about. They don't get defensive at all. He what's the word I want? Caters. He collapses into this mode of mourning and repentance. Compare Jonah and the king, if you will.
Well, gosh, Jonah was throwing a fit. The king just complied. I mean, it's like night and day.
Yeah, it reminds us of the sailors who were also unbelievers and ended up praying to God and taking God seriously. The storm had something to do with that. But for the king and for the people of Nineveh, it was just that brief prophecy. And they were fearful enough to take it seriously. Also, comparing him with the sailors again, he says, who knows? Maybe God will relent and change his mind. And the sailors said, when they were urging Jonah to pray to his God, perhaps your God will be the one that will hear us. So there's almost a kind of longing or hope on the part of these non-believers that there might be something there, which Jonah could have capitalized on, but he didn't. You notice it's...
I wonder if there was something about Jonah's past that was known to the sailors and or to the people of Nineveh, and even if they had known like that he had been saved, from the whale, that would have given a different sense of validity to anything he said.
Because of his ordeal.
Right.
Ah.
The fact that he survived something that people don't normally survive.
Yes.
It wasn't resurrection necessarily, but it was unusual.
Yeah. It says, where is it, verse 3, Jonah set out and went to Nineveh, verse 4, going a day's walk. So first it says it would take you 3 days to walk across, but he only goes one day. And I'm picturing him like kind of strolling and looking around, and then he says his brief words, but it was like he was getting the lay of the land. I don't know. It's interesting that he just went in a little bit, whatever it would take you, however long it would, however far a day's walk would take you. And they believed and proclaimed a fast, and they put on sackcloth. Okay, they're mourning in a way, but also repenting. Do you think that those kind of physical symbols, not necessarily the fasting, but the sackcloth and the ashes, are helpful for those periods of time when we're mourning or feeling sorrow because of repentance or sorrow because of a loss? We've lost, I think, some of the customs that we the society used to take on during times of mourning. But are they helpful? Should we retrieve them? What do you think?
I know that my husband was Jewish when his grandmother died. They still wore for quite a period of time the black ribbon that was slashed, and it was pinned to their coat lapel or something where it was evident.
And for 7 days, the Jews pray Kaddish, the prayer for the dead.
Mm-hmm. And it was my first exposure to any of this. I grew up in a German Lutheran community. I didn't even know anybody that was Jewish till I went to college. But, to be exposed like that and these 7 days of sitting and all the
Excuse me,
tears.
do people come and visit during those 7 days?
Yeah. And they bring sweets. That's the thing. There's a lot of sweets involved because
It would make me look forward to mourning.
that's supposed to make you think really sweet thoughts.
Yeah, yeah.
The deceased, and the beers were drank in black. It was just so unusual for me and such an education. And they really hung onto that.
And could you value that? I mean, was it something you appreciated?
Yeah. So I thought, actually, it was wonderful because for 7 nights, and this was in a modern day, setting, people are taking time out after work. They don't go home and watch TV. They come to this house. They talk about the deceased. They go through with the rabbi, the service, but then after that, they stay for an hour or two, and it's sort of like what we do in a viewing.
Yeah.
But it's 7 days, and then a year later, they unveil the tombstone, and you meet out at the cemetery, and once again, the tombstone is draped in black, and it's taken off, and you spend time around the tomb, talking about that person again. It really, to me, it was like you really want to keep that person's memory in your heart and on your tongue.
It sounds like it would also assuage some of the grief.
Yeah,
I mean, you're there because of grief, but it's a comfort
right.
to have.
You went in the front door before you came in. You washed your hands outside, and you went out the back door. You didn't go out the same door you came in. There was just so much visual tradition.
Who was the deceased at the time?
Pardon?
Who was the person who died?
It was my husband's grandmother
No, but where was the deceased?
in Philadelphia.
His body.
Was the body there at the house? Oh, and the body was during the
usually you have to be buried within the day. With the
Yeah,
dead.
it's 72 hours.
Or,
Yeah.
well, the
Because they
Orthodox
don't believe
especially.
in embalming.
Right. Wow, that's interesting.
Because their Messiah hasn't come.
Right.
So, but it was,
It sounds meaningful.
yes,
It is.
very.
Alberta.
They're very committed to caring for the person that has lost someone too. My sister and I were in Cleveland Heights, and we were in an Orthodox neighborhood. I think there might have been one other Christian family besides us, you know. But it was interesting when her husband passed. The sweets, I never realized that was why they were bringing trays of sweets. But several of the people that knew my brother-in-law was one of these guys that would shovel somebody's driveway. I mean, he just was always out there helping. And the neighbor's young son came, and he was, I think, 9 or 10, and said, I really am going to miss Mr. Shirley, and what I want to tell you is that I'm going to take out your rubbish for the next year.
Wow.
Wait, and then the neighbor on the other side, their son, who was a doctor at the ER there at UH, I believe, and then the other one was a dentist, he came over and he said, I just want to let you know that I'm going to snow blow your driveway for the
Wow.
next year when it's needed. And I said to him, I said, my sister leaves early. He says, well, then I'll just have to get up earlier. It almost sounded like Amish to me. A little bit.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
help one another. But I was really taken back at that care for someone when they've lost.
With really practical things that
Right.
become a big problem when
Right.
somebody dies. Yeah.
It is.
I think the whole thing is a societal issue, is that we minimize anything that's bad and maximize anything that's good, which is why the Christmas decorations have been up since September. Because we want that to, it used to be this, well then, if it's this and it's good, then this must be better and this must be better. And so we continue to expand all this stuff. So, I mean, I see it in all kinds of societal rights and stuff like, so the graduation rite is pretty neat. Oh, so let's do that for when you graduate kindergarten.
It's like, what's left?
So we increase all these things, and at the same time we minimize anything,
Huh.
we lessen anything that's bad. And so the same with, and I think this, we don't work, we don't do anything in the Greek process. And I can't tell you how many times people will say, and Jill is very aware of this same approach too, that I ask people, family members, if loved one dies, how are they doing? And and people say, oh, they seem upset. They say, well, yeah, they better, they should be upset. You should be depressed.
Something would be wrong if they weren't.
We were thinking about going and getting them a prescription just to, and that happens so much.
Right.
Because we can't be sad. And I'm like, no, that's normal. That's what should happen. And when we don't allow ourselves to go through the process, and we push it down, we shove it down, and then it ekes out in other ways that are unhealthy. And I just really feel like I really got into it with a hospital in Pittsburgh with my father here when he was really ill and we didn't think he was going to live. It was in May of 2019. My mother died in February. And so they were coming in and they were just like, couldn't figure out what was going on. He had all these things going on with him. It turned out, in the end, that he's a heart transplant recipient, but for whatever reason, nobody caught it until one of the heart rejection medicines started to basically poison him.
Ooh.
It flipped, and it took a while. But at one point, they brought in, because they couldn't figure out what was going on, and they said, they were put down and they were talking hospice and all this stuff, but failure to thrive was what they were, and so they said, well, we're bringing a counselor in that's going to talk, I'm like, whatever. And then they're like, well, what do you think they should give him some antidepressants, that he's just missing his wife, and I'm like, because, yes, he answers those questions, are you depressed about you? Yes, I am. Of course he is. But they think, oh, we've got to take it, and then so I can still remember.
Did they want him to say easy come, easy go?
Right, I know. And so I wrote this long letter to the social worker because I was driving back here for church and stuff, and I wrote this and dictated, I'm like, we're not going to put him on antidepressants. That's not the issue. And I'm like, of course, and we don't let people be sad. It's okay that he's sad. He's not saying I don't want to live anymore. It's not what he's, so I kind of got in. The social worker actually was pretty great, communicated back, and she was more on my page. And then they found out, sad, and it's okay. But as a society, we don't like to deal with anything. We minimize that, maximize the other. And
Yeah.
I think it catches up with us eventually.
Yeah, I've been to grief conferences where they talk about how we're a death-denying society. And the fact that we are not doing some of these grief-related rituals any longer means that we are, it doesn't allow us to pretend that death is different. You know, and it doesn't factor into how our attitude with medicine often is, we can't let this person die. We have to do everything. And that's where I'm at least grateful that we have hospice, because hospice allows people to die gracefully, to think about quality of life rather than quantity of days. And that is so valuable for us to realize that we are not the sum of the number of days we've survived since our diagnosis of something, but rather the fullness of life that we've been allowed to live the entire life.
That's beautiful.
You know, hospice is amazing because when my mother was being she was on hospice, and it made such a difference. In fact, she flourished under hospice that she ended up getting taken off of it 3 separate times because she appreciated hospice and what it was doing for her. And while it was a short-term, bump up, it was amazing to watch how that
Yeah.
kind of care, just psychologically and mentally, and was just amazing to watch. And
That
I just think
that same thing happened to my mom. This is off point a bit, but she was just on hospice for maybe a week, and this is when I was on the bishop's staff, and the woman came in to talk with me about I guess she was a social worker, her going on hospice, and then she said, "Will your mother need clergy?" And I said, "Oh no, her pastor will visit her." And she looked at me and said, "Will you need clergy?" And I said, "My life is lousy with clergy." And the poor woman didn't know what to say. I said, "No, it's okay, I'm fine." But anyway, excuse me for that, but no, I don't need another pastor. Yeah. Unfinished.
Yeah, and I know that this sister would love to be here, and Morgan won in Boston, and so I just have to wait.
we continue to celebrate him every day when we think about it.
Okay. Where were we?
Talking about repentance, sackcloth, and ashes.
Right.
We went into the
And then God changes God's mind
right.
and doesn't bring the calamity upon them. So the questions in the middle or towards the bottom of that page, how does God respond to Gentiles, and can God forgive even Israel's most brutal enemies, of which Assyria was one, Nineveh, the capital of Assyria? So we want to begin to understand not just why Jonah ran away from the mission that God had called him to, but also the depth of his animosity towards these people. I don't know if his 5 Hebrew word prophecy was said through his teeth, or if he secretly in the back of his mind was a bit delighted that he could say, Nineveh shall be overthrown.
Is this a little racial prejudice?
Oh, could be, yeah. But with good reason in terms of their history. They decimated Israel and didn't take them into captivity like the Babylonians did, but did take a lot of the Israelites out of their homeland, and that kind of thing stays with you, you know. And hundreds of years later, he still has that animosity towards those people. So what he's pondering are those next two questions. Can God forgive even our most brutal enemies? And how big is God's forgiveness? And then we need to turn it to ourselves. What does this mean for those of us who think of ourselves as the people of God? We're not the people of Israel, but our community of faith, the people of God. How does God respond to our enemies? How does God respond to the people we hate? That might be as a nation. It might be personally. It might be somebody who voted differently from you last month and is real vocal about it. The people that we want to dismiss, or the people we just, I hate to keep saying hate, but you know, there certainly is a lot of hate in our country, and we're not all Christians. So
When you think about stories about people who've been a murderer, for example, in a prison, and you know the family's ability to potentially forgive or not forgive, or have they come to Christ, you know, in knowledge as well, and how does that impact?
the people who was his name Dylan Roof, murdered in Charleston? Was that the guy? Just a couple days later, some of their relatives talked about forgiveness, and that was astounding to me. And I was skeptical about it, and I've heard since other people talk about that. Maybe that was too quick. Maybe there needed to be some, but it seems to me their hearts were listening to what they had learned in that very place about forgiving and about God's love. And I don't know if that penetrated Dylan Roof's mind. Probably not, but it was dramatic. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Okay. That phrase of the kings, who knows, does that feel to you like there's some inconstancy in God? Do you like the fact of thinking God's mind can be changed?
That was one of the things, I think his name was Michael, that he said he struggled with, because if God is all-knowing,
Right.
how can that?
Yeah.
But I said, there's many examples of that throughout the Bible, so I think that's a beautiful thing too, you know. But maybe he did know he was going to, but he needed to do this for Jonah and for the people, and he might have known the outcome. But then other times outcomes aren't like that, so it is a bit of a challenging piece.
I like that idea of saying doing this for Jonah. That's a neat
Right, because if he knew,
concept.
then why did he put Jonah through this? But on the other hand, look what it did for him. You know.
We hope.
I was going to say maybe or hope.
I don't know if
I don't want to sound like a skeptic, but you know.
when Mike talked about that 2 weeks ago, if I said this then, I'm repeating myself, but that's too bad. I'm the teacher. Abraham bargaining with God about can there be 50 people righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah, and then don't. Well, how about 10? How about, you know, and that image of God as a bargainer and someone you can wrangle with in that way, I like, but I think for some people it might make them uneasy, you know. And then on the other hand, Jesus in the garden says, Father, if it's your will, take this cup from me. And God didn't relent. That was what was going to happen. So God's not always persuadable. Okay, we better move on. Jonah chapter 4. I want to do this as a dialogue. I'll be the narrator. Missy, would you be the Lord? Has anybody said that to you before? And Pastor, would you be Jonah? Okay, and I'll narrate. But this, okay, now God changed his mind, so this is what happens next. But this was very displeasing to Jonah, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord and said,
Lord, is not this what I said while I was still in my own country? That is why I fled to Tarshish at the beginning, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and ready to relent from punishing. And now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live.
and the Lord said,
Is it right for you to be angry?
Then Jonah went out of the city and sat down east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade, waiting to see what would become of the city. The Lord God appointed a bush, and it came up over Jonah to give shade over his head, to save him from his discomfort. So Jonah was happy about the bush. But when dawn came up the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the bush, so that it withered. When the sun rose, God prepared a sultry east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint, and asked that he might die. He said,
It is better for me to die than to live.
but God said to Jonah,
Is it right for you to be angry about the bush?
and he said,
Yes, angry enough to die.
then the Lord said,
You are concerned about the bush, for which you did not labor, and which you did not grow. It came into being in a night and perished in a night. And should I not be concerned about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and smell so many animals?
and there it ends with that crazy question. And I think I mentioned this the first week. The King James Version said, instead of many animals, also much cattle. I just love that phrase. All these people and also much cattle. So, where are we? Okay, on page 2. How would you describe Jonah in chapter 4?
Petulant child.
I was just going to say, those of you who are parents, can you think of instances like this? Petulant is a perfect word. And again, he's, yeah, stomping feet, turning red, maybe a tantrum or two. And how is God portrayed?
Basically, he's telling Jonah, get a life.
It's like, really, it wasn't up to you.
But he's engaging with him. Yeah.
He is, but he's
Using psychology.
doesn't have a lot of patience at that point.
Yeah.
Jonah's attitude.
Right.
And the word appointed, do I have that down there somewhere? Can also be translated provided. It's used in chapter 1, God appointed a fish. Here it's used, God appointed a plant. And if you care, you can drop this in your conversation sometime. The plant was likely a castor bean plant, castor oil bean plant.
Well, he already was in the shade, because it said he sat under it in the shade when he made the booth for himself. And then after that, then there was the bush that gave him shade. So I was like, well, okay. Not that that's a big deal, but
And then God appoints a worm.
right. But when God says to Jonah, yes, is it right for you to be angry about the bush? He doesn't say you shouldn't be angry. He says it in that way, that it's more like teaching them, is it right?
Is that what you, as a parent, would do? try to coax them out of it?
When I'm in a good frame.
Depends how old the
Have them calm
child is.
down
I'm sorry?
Depends how old the child is.
when they are calm, you know.
Yeah.
But
Does this make sense to you? Yes.
well, he could be honest with God. He wasn't as much as he kind of was resentful in that. He wasn't. I shouldn't say he wasn't afraid, but he could answer him.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
which is pretty powerful when you think about it, you know, because some people, oh no, I don't think so. Yeah.
Jonah's telling God what's on his mind.
Yes.
And he could have said, I hate the Assyrians. But instead, he turns it on to God. I knew you were going to be like this. I knew from the beginning about your loving kindness. I knew that you were going to have mercy. And
Because he was still angry.
yeah.
Maybe at another time when he goes back, he could say, what a wonderful God we have that is, you know.
But Jonah is so revealing of himself.
Yes, he is. He's so
Yeah.
human.
Yep, yeah. I love that.
That was a lot he went through. I mean,
I'm sorry?
that was quite an ordeal he went through.
Yes.
Of his own, you know.
But actually, the discomfort when the bush starts to wilt is nothing compared to the belly of a fish. And in the belly of the fish, he praised God, so.
It does make you wonder what Jonah had gone through or done for the Lord before this saga. You know, there had to have been some history there. You know,
What kind of a prophet was he before this? Maybe his sermons were a little longer.
I mean, you know, I guess I just can't quite imagine him being, you know, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah and said, go to Nineveh. Well,
Why?
you know, it's like, what have your relationship been with the Lord before this? That now all of a sudden he's got this task for you that you really, like today's sermon, you don't want to do, you know? You're asked to do something that just doesn't seem like.
But actually, we could say that about any of the folks we've mentioned resisting. What kind of a relationship did God have with Jeremiah before he said, here's what I want you to do? Or with Mary before the angel said, guess what? Yeah.
I guess this is just one more example of the personalities of people have been the same throughout all time.
Yes, human nature. Yep. There were a lot of heads nodding during your sermon this morning.
But, you know, it's also interesting, and maybe I shouldn't even be going there.
Go right ahead.
Should I not be concerned about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who do not know their right hand from their left, and also many animals? And so it was almost, when you say that about somebody, they don't know their right hand from their left. It's almost like they're kind of lost and they need somebody to follow or someone to be a teacher or to love them so that they can, you know.
And there was something in them that made them repent.
Repent, right.
So, as they started to evaluate, or maybe they were fearful, 40 days and you're going to be overthrown, my hunch is you would say, what did I do? And if they started self-examining, then...
But it's interesting it ends up with this last sentence, that's all.
Yeah.
That's not, because here they did repent and he forgave them.
And actually God characterizes them as at a loss rather than evil. Yeah. But their being at a loss could have led to evil.
Right.
They...
Not knowing what they're doing. They didn't know, that's normally what happens.
Yeah.
Know what they were doing.
Luther brings up Romans when he's talking about this part of Jonah. Is God the God of the Jews only? Is he not God of the Gentiles also? Jonah shows us even the wicked Assyrians were a concern for God. And Jonah, if we're in the Lutheran context here, is a good example of law and gospel. The Lutheran way of understanding Scripture is looking at it through the lens of law and the lens of gospel. The law shows us our sin, and the gospel shows us life. So with Jonah, not only do the Ninevites take a look at themselves, but we hope Jonah did. We're not real convinced, I'm not real convinced, that Jonah was self-examining. Since the book ends with that question, and Jonah's still under the bush, maybe he had opportunity to ponder it. We can hope, but God's words, instead of saying with a grimace, I knew you were slow to anger and merciful, maybe as he sat under the bush, he could say, he could start singing, there's a wideness in God's mercy. There's, which includes me. We don't know.
There's a beautiful word, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. And when we sing that, it's just like, I couldn't imagine. It was like, I knew you were.
And that's initially in Leviticus, I think, when God's described in that way, and other prophets, including Jeremiah, repeat that. And that's a good thing for us to remember, because we often caricature the God of the Hebrew Scriptures as mean and punishing, and all of a sudden God has a personality change, and here comes the New Testament. But this is the Old Testament God showing mercy and teeing off Jonah, but loving these people of Nineveh. Any other thoughts?
Well, thank you for allowing us to cover this entire story in a unique way.
Yes.
Good.
There's a lot more.
There's a lot of lessons in this. Right.
48 verses. I have a closing prayer that I did not write, but that I like a lot, and I'd like to end with that. Dear God, out of the mouths of babes and infants, mules and angels, and even whales, your good word goes forth. Let us, with all creation, sing your praise and bring your welcome word to this weary world. Give us tongues fit to declare your message to all with ears to hear, and grant us hearts to match this calling. By your Spirit we ask this, and with your Spirit, empower us in Jesus' name. Amen.